Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Don, who is going to, he's going to tell us some very interesting things about the work that he did for a large HMO in California. Dr. Don, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a privilege, and honor, and a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much. I want to give you briefly some of my background, and then we'll proceed to the slide presentation.
Please
Uh,
do.
I practiced for 40 years as an internist, the last 25 years with the large HMO, and I retired about 12, 13 years ago. And over the 40 years of practice, I got fatter and sicker with full metabolic syndrome. I was obese, I was hypertensive, I had lipid abnormalities for which I took medications. I had diagnosed with prediabetes with an A1C of 5.8. Not only was I getting fatter and sicker despite swimming laps and doing a lot of exercise, uh, but I made my patients fatter and sicker too. They never got better, which was very frustrating for me. The worst cases, of course, were the diabetics who I had a very large panel of diabetics. I placed them on insulin. Of course, they got fatter and sicker. Um, about almost a decade ago, I had a coronary artery calcium scan, which showed very high score in the hundreds. That was my wake-up call that if I didn't change, I was going to die prematurely of heart disease. So in September of 2022, I started a fairly strict carnivore diet. I completely reversed my metabolic syndrome. My triglycerides went from over 200 to about 57, where they are now. My HDL was 39. It went up to almost 60, and tomorrow I'm going for more labs. But my triglyceride to HDL ratio, which is at least 5 times more predictive of heart disease than LDL, is now around 1, which is perfect. I lost 62 pounds of metabolically toxic fat over the course of 2.5 years. So, and I owe my life to the low carb community because without them, I think I wouldn't be here. Uh, anyway, this all got me thinking about how to convince people to go on a carnivore diet and get off the standard American diet, which is really toxic. So I envision that there are 5 ways of reforming medical practice. The first is YouTube influencers, people who give low carb symposia or TED Talks, such as yourself or Ben Bickman or uh, Paul Mason, Robert Lustig. The list goes on and on. These are all very prominent, brilliant people who've spent decades doing proper research. The second means is grassroots action. We have activists like Dr. Sean Baker, who recently started his program called Revero, Revero, uh, instituting a program where patients who are dissatisfied with traditional medical care could join him and his team and reverse their metabolic illnesses, whatever they are, using a low-carb diet. Judy Cho, Nutrition with Judy, who's an alternate board-certified nutritionist who uh, keeps very close track of her patients, monitors their blood results, and also teaches the tenets of a low-carb diet. Peter Bruckner in Australia, who you may know, working with the Australian government. Australian government is very smart. They want to reduce their healthcare costs and improve outcomes. So they're working with Peter now to defeat diabetes. We don't have that yet in this country. Uh, the fourth way, the third way is production of scientific papers. David Unwin in the UK and Jason Fung in Canada are now reversing diabetes. They have scores of patients they've prevented long-term complications of diabetes, and they have reversed diabetes in so many patients, uh, in fact, resulting in either their use of no medication or decreased amounts of medication. Metabolic psychiatrists, a new field of psychiatry, uh, championed by Dr. Norma Eid and Chris Palmer of Harvard. And they are producing large-scale studies now to show that even formerly intractable diseases like schizophrenia and um, manic depressive disorder can be cured. A lot of these patients have gotten off their medication just by following a low-carb ketogenic diet carnivore. diet. But the last bit has not yet been tried, which is we have legislative action, of course. Robert Lustig and Nina Teicholz going in front of congressional committees, trying to educate them and explain to them why patients need to be turned away from the standard American diet and put on a low carb or carnivore diet. But the new USDA guidelines come out in 2025. They're trying their best to influence them so they'll change from the standard high carb, low fat diet to a low fat to a high protein, low carb diet. It's yet to be clear whether or not they're going to prevail. The fifth mode of action is legal action, and this is what I'm proposing because it hasn't yet been explored. So what I want to do basically is initiate a class action lawsuit against large scale healthcare providers like the HMO that I worked in for 25 years, because being on the inside, I could see the tremendous deficits in uh, not teaching proper diet, not advocating for proper early diagnostic interventions, like doing a baseline insulin or a baseline fasting blood sugar test, or a 2-hour glucose tolerance test, or a 4-hour or 5-hour craft test. They don't do any of this. We shouldn't have to beg. This is, or bring it to their attention. They should be doing this on their own, but they're not. This is going to take a class action lawsuit to awaken them to the fact that how they've been going about their business is hurting patients. Um, so the issues are that we lie and mislead patients about the root causes of disease. We treat only symptoms. That's the nature of an allopathic physician treating chronic disease. We wait for symptoms to occur and then we treat the symptoms. We never address root cause, and we never talk about diet as being the primary focus, the fulcrum from which everything else arises. We never do that. We don't have the time or the interest to do that. That has to change. Therefore, the general public is ignorant of the truth. They're getting sicker earlier. Their health span is being shortened, and their lifespan is being shortened. We are uh, dying younger, and we're dying sicker. And this can't is not tolerable. And we're bankrupting Medicare and insurance. Okay. Anyway, there is a clause in the law called the but-for clause, and it goes like this: but for the fact that my medical provider or my dietitian never told me once about the potential benefits of a high-fat, low-carb diet, either because he didn't know or else he gave me misleading information, like the corrupt standard American diet and its variants, which all push for high carb, low fat. Uh, but for the fact that they didn't tell me about this approach, I might never have developed my diabetes or all the downstream complications of my diabetes, which has caused me and those dependent on me great suffering and hardship, physical, mental, financial. These might include patients who have had diabetic patients who've had a heart attack, a stroke, peripheral neuropathy, amputation of limbs, kidney failure, blindness from macular degeneration, and so on. But my doctor never told me. He knew, or he should have known, but he never told me. And all of this could have been prevented. Um, or another patient. I might never have opted to have bariatric surgery. Had I've been told that I don't need the surgery. What I need to do is be placed on a carnivore diet. I could strip my weight down like you did, doctor. Or I might never have needed to take or wanted to take a GLP-1 agonist like Wegovy. And if everyone in the country took Wegovy, who wanted Wegovy, Medicare would go broke. It would be trillions of dollars mislaid, misspent, whereas you could do it just by diet alone. And it's not a benign drug, as you know. A lot of patients have infarcted their bowels and had to have their bowels removed because of Wegovy. Or uh, it's become so expensive, even with a copay, maybe $12,000 a year, that eventually a lot of these patients can no longer afford even a copay for the Wegovy. They stop taking the Wegovy, and what happens? They gain all their weight back and then some. And 25 to 50% of these patients on Wegovy lose their muscle mass. They lose their weight, sure, they lose their fat, but they also lose muscle. And the muscle is the thing that helps to burn their fat. So these patients were never told about a carnivore diet, a low carb diet. And so that now they're suffering the consequences of it. Who else? And these are just a few examples. Had I been told about carnivore diet or low carb diet, I might never have developed sleep apnea. I might never have had to tie my life to a CPAP machine, the oxygen mask that helps to blow oxygen into my lungs, air into my lungs. I might never have had a near fatal nocturnal rhythm disturbance from having low oxygen because of that. Now, I had snoring and I had sleep apnea, and I'll show you the pictures later if we have time on my passport photos. Big fat neck, big fat tongue. When I went to sleep, they fell back and restricted my airway. So I had snoring, and I'm sure I had hypoxic episodes. Went on the low carb diet, carnivore diet, lost 62 pounds. My belly fat disappeared. The fat in my tongue disappeared. The fat in my neck disappeared. My snoring disappeared. My sleep apnea disappeared. But a lot of these patients are just given a CPAP machine and told you need to wear this every night. But that's not the cure for the condition. The cure for the condition is a carnivore or low carb diet, which will take away the fat from the tongue and the neck and prevent obstruction. Um, another one, had my doctor told me about a carnivore or low carb diet, I might have been able to reverse my PCOS and become pregnant, uh, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Or I might not have had a stroke from hypertension or developed kidney failure, requiring me to be on dialysis. But my doctor never told me about these things. What are you going to do, doc? You son of a bee, because you knew this or you should have known this and you didn't tell me. And now can you see the suffering that you have caused? And for 40 years, I misled my patients and myself because I adhered to the standard American diet. So if I seem a little bit angry or infuriated because I've been duped and my colleagues have been duped, whether for innocent ignorance or uh, willful ignorance, whatever it is, the patient has suffered as a result. And so this is my attempt to make restitution to these patients for um, the sort of malpractice that I've done. There's no other way of putting it.
Mm. Well, I think that's it was very commendable of you to, to recognize this and to look back and try to correct things for people. There's a lot of doctors that when they see this, they think, wow, I need to change. I need to get on this because this can really help my patients. And I don't want to keep doing the other thing because that wasn't helping,
Yeah,
which is what you've done. And you've gone further than that. You're trying to really make a big change for people, which is great. Then some people, I think they maybe just don't want to hear it, don't really care, or
absolutely.
maybe they really can't handle the idea that everything that they've been doing has actually been hurting people, not helping them.
That's correct.
And that's very hard. That's very hard to hear that the things that you're doing is actually causing harm to people that you actually care about. But it's very important because if you don't do that, then you're going to continue doing the harm.
That's exactly
And
right.
it's so important to recognize that and to move on.
Thank you for that. That the cognitive dissonance is terrible,
Yeah.
but the Kubler-Ross grieving for the
Mm,
things that I know that I've done to these patients with a
mm,
large diabetic panel, making them worse every year. You want to know why physicians burn out or commit
mm.
suicide? That's the reason. Because
Yeah.
they see huge panels of patients getting more and more every year as these chronic diseases explode.
Mm,
They're having less time for each patient because there are so many patients to see. My panel became bigger and bigger and bigger every year. The number of patients I had to see exploded,
mm.
and the time I had to spend with them decreased because I had to handle this mess. And you wonder why physicians burn out or want to leave their profession. That's the reason.
Yeah.
So, why have a lawsuit? And to
Mm,
prevail, what must a lawsuit show? We want to answer the question, do current medical practices and procedures cause injury to the patient? In what ways might this be true? Can expert testimony and real science prove that this is true? Related to this, what classes or types of patients have been injured? Well, I just gave you about five, but I've developed a list of about 20, 30. It goes on and on. These patients represent different classes, but they're all variants of the consequences of metabolic syndrome. Never diagnosed, never treated. Are these patient injuries foreseeable and preventable? Well, of course. Of course they are. Jason Fung, Unwin, and so many others are showing that this is the case. Do we have to change our practices? Yes. I'd rather have the medical profession do it on its own. But if push comes to shove, whatever action is necessary, and if it takes a lawsuit to wake them up, then that's what it takes. And if the above are true, should injured patients be fairly compensated and how? Well, if someone has had a stroke or a heart attack or diabetic complications and amputation, I can't give them back their limbs. But what we can do is make financial restitution to them, whether it's sponsored by government or sponsored by the HMO or a combination of the two. We need to set up a trust fund. We need to say, mea culpa, we have screwed up your lives. And at the very least, we owe you a financial restitution for the suffering that we caused, whether through innocent ignorance or willful ignorance or complicity. There's a lot of complicity, corruption that's going on. It's the exchange of money that's poisoned medicine. And published surveys have shown that most primary providers don't know what metabolic syndrome is. High insulin with insulin resistance associated with high intakes of fructose, lectin, seed oils, or even what tests are needed to prove the diagnosis early on, like insulin resistance, fasting sugar, insulin, fasting insulin, 2-hour glucose tolerance test, which is almost never done, a 4-hour Kraft test measuring insulin spikes, almost never done. And uh, the idea that diet alone can cure these conditions, if they're on the proper diet, low carb or carnivore. But then if the diet worked well and did the job, then why would you need doctors? That's the next question, isn't it? Why would you need doctors? But big medicine is a $4.3 trillion a year industry and growing, bigger than the GDPs of so many nations. Why we so big medicine, do we need it? Probably not. A lot of us are going to be replaced by AI anyway. Junk food manufacturers, big food would object, of course. Their profits would go into the toilet where they belong. Medical device companies, big pharma, all these will be affected. Talk about medical device companies. You know, and I know that when you go to a medical convention, I'm speaking of my primary care. I don't know about neurosurgery, but primary care, they have exposition for the pharmacy. It's the size of Grand Central Station. They have table after table after table of the latest drugs, all treating symptoms, not root causes, of course. They have table after table of the latest medical device companies. For example, there may be about 50 different types of CPAP machines that treat sleep apnea. And all we have to do is tell the patients, if you go on a carnivore diet, low carb diet, you're going to lose weight. The tongue will disappear from your neck and your tongue. Here's Dr. Don. Here's an example for you. He completely reversed it. He never needed a CPAP machine. They'd be out of business in 2 seconds. So they're not going to easily give up their perks and prerogatives. You better believe it, right? Okay. Thank you for letting me rant here for a few minutes.
No
So
problem.
the manifesto that I provided you advocates two issues, and both of them need to be resolved. First, advocates changing provider practices and procedures so as not to injure any further patients going forward. Second, to provide financial institutions for patients already provably injured by medical neglect and or incompetence or deceptive practices, deliberate malfeasance. Your doctor, ladies and gentlemen, is not necessarily your best friend when it comes to treating chronic illness. And I hate to say that. It really hurts me to say that because I tried to spend my life doing the right thing, only to find out at the end of my career that I was played for a patsy and a fool, doing the wrong thing for all those years. So there exists now a uh, cluster of exploding chronic medical illnesses, Western diseases worldwide, falling under the umbrella of metabolic syndrome diseases. Most of them, as you have so eloquently stated in the past in your presentations, didn't exist or were rare, even as late as the 19th and early 20th centuries, but have become epidemics since then, and especially since 1980, when the concept of the food pyramid or standard American diet was first introduced. Now, our human genetics, our DNA, has not changed in the last 200 years. This suggests that it's an exposure to toxins in the environment which are making us sick. And indeed, these toxins are pretty much all plant-based, and yet they are the cornerstone of the heavily promoted and government-sanctioned food pyramid, which we rely on for nutritional advice, and which we believe is supported by most common people believe it's supported by science. Not true at all. It's and the So we have the food pyramid, and we have its modern variants, My Plate Food Compass. The effects of these toxins on the body, as you have so eloquently stated in the past, are slow and cumulative over years and decades. Now, cyanide and hemlock are plant-based, but they will kill you in hours. Tobacco will kill you in decades. Uh, Toxins in food will kill you over decades. Our The telomeres in our genes tell us that we could live to be at least 115 years old if we don't succumb to chronic metabolic disease. But people think that they're getting old. My age, I'm 75. They think that maybe they have a few years left before, but this is not true. Of course, it's not true. You have said that the American Indians, the buffalo eaters, apart from being beautiful physical specimens, 6 feet 2, 6 feet tall, 6 foot 4, their parents and grandparents living to 120, not considered unusual, right? And yet we're dying younger and younger from chronic diseases. Okay, anyway. So it is exposure to excess plant-derived dietary sugar, seed oils, lectins, and so on that have poisoned us, basically. And we've lost our natural host defenses because of modern day use of antibiotics, plant insecticides, uh, like glyphosate, which are in the air and the water we breathe it, we drink it, lectins in wheat, for example, and toxic additives. These are making us fatter and sicker and shortening our lifespan. Now, it's interesting. I have Dr. William Davis's book called Undoctored. You probably know Dr. Davis well. Maybe you don't, I don't know. But anyway, the subtitle is Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. This is my Bible. I love this guy.
Nice.
Uh, the other one I love is Kate Shanahan's Dark Calories,
Mm.
which how vegetable oils destroy our health and how we can get it back. I adhere to Dr. Davis's prescription for fermented yogurt. Uh, I use a sous vide, and I make my own yogurt with a starter culture of Lactobacillus reuteri. There are about a dozen or so still Stone Age tribes who have Stone Age gut bacteria, which we have wiped out with our glyphosate and antibiotics. And taking this L. reuteri Greek yogurt, um, and you can buy the starter pills. I put a little bit of inulin and half, and then I make some jars of it. And I have about a half a cup every day to restore my normal gut flora because L. reuteri is a bactericidin. When colon bacteria try to invade into the small intestine, like Klebsiella or E. coli and so on, the L. reuteri that I'm putting back into my gut will kill these and prevent them from taking over my small intestine. Therefore, I have a decreased chance of getting leaky gut, which, as you know, is one of the primary causes of metabolic syndrome. And Dr. Davis estimates that about half of the American people have leaky gut. It's probably more than that. So I don't want to be that statistic. And so because I know I have heart disease and everything else, and I had metabolic syndrome, I'm trying to keep myself healthy. Anyway, go get his book. That's the for those in your audience who don't have it yet. Um, so anyway, the results of all of these dietary choices is, of course, as you have demonstrated so often in your wonderful symposia, is overstimulation in the body of the pancreatic hormone insulin, which promotes the production of fat and storage and is involved in tissue inflammation pathways. The excess circulating insulin causes the liver to make too much fat from sugar, mainly from its fructose component, and this fat is then exported to other tissues via lipoprotein carrier molecules. And in these tissues, like abdominal adipose tissue, for example, the excess fat is often considered a foreign body, thus causing a secondary immune inflammatory reaction. And this inflammation is then spread by the lipoproteins throughout the body. And so your immune system is hyperactivated and never turned off. Linoleic acid and seed oils, of course, is a primary uh, component that gets easily oxidized and sends these free radicals all over the place, which are causing toxicity to our cells.
Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Now, believe it or not, this is a street scene from New York City in 1930. Do you see any obesity? No, not really. Sugar and seed oil consumption are still relatively low, but slowly rising. We still have, uh, I think, was it Nabisco who put Crisco oil, the trans fat oil, in 1911, but it still hasn't really dominated our food intake at this point. So you can see these New Yorkers walk around, they're pretty thin. They're healthy, or they're at their proper weight, or maybe even a little bit skinny. Their blood levels of insulin are low, even after eating, because the majority of the food eaten is still mainly animal fat and protein, and not insulin spiking carbohydrates. Now let's go to slide 2.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, God. This is a beach scene from the United Kingdom in 2023. Of course, they imported our corrupt standard food guideline pyramid, and it shows the outward manifestation of chronic high consumption of carbs and sugar and seed oils worldwide. These people have high circulating blood levels of sugar, high circulating levels of insulin. They are insulin resistant, and they are at risk for premature death from multiple potential causes. Uh, High insulin hormone levels turn dietary fructose that we eat in our added in sugar from what we ingest. They turn it into fat in the liver, where it is exported out into other tissues on the lipoproteins. And this fat lines our blood vessels. This leads to hardening of the arteries, strokes, and heart attacks. This fat is exported into our belly, making people fat, as you see here. It accumulates in the liver, leading to scarring, cirrhosis or nodular liver, liver failure, and the need for transplantation, liver cancer. This fat accumulates in the pancreas, killing the insulin-producing beta cells and thus accelerating the onset of diabetes. The fat goes into ectopic places like the neck and the tongue, making the fat and closing off the airways at night, causing deadly sleep apnea, which is what I had. It goes into the kidneys, contributing to kidney failure. It goes into the muscles, causing thin muscles, what we call sarcopenia and muscle weakness, and the potential for falling. So these people are ticking time bombs, but they're innocent victims because they don't know that if they started on a high carbohydrate diet, they could lose several hundred pounds and return to a normal weight. Okay,
Low carbohydrate diet.
but low carbohydrate
Yeah.
and ideally carnivore.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, in the US, conservatively, 70% of the population is obese or overweight. And this is recently increased, I think, to about 74%, but let's keep it at 70%, which is what I know. And 43% of them, of these 70% are obese. 80% of the 70% have metabolic syndrome. But for the others who are normal weight, 40% of those who are normal weight still have metabolic syndrome. They're not fat externally, but if you did a DEXA scan of their liver, you'd show that they had fat in their liver. These are people who are not outwardly fat, but they're eating a diet high in carbohydrates. And even though they haven't accumulated belly fat, their livers are full of fat. And it's the liver that's the primary site that initiates the metabolic syndrome. So these thin people with fat livers are called thin on the outside, fat on the inside, or TOFI. And if you took the time to do a DEXA scan, for example, someone comes in, they're getting scanned for osteoporosis, they do a DEXA scan, okay, but they don't do a DEXA scan of the liver at the same time. Why not? It doesn't add extra time or money to it. Do a scan of the liver. 40% of these patients will have metabolic syndrome. They won't know about it, won't know what to do about it, or what tests to order because the doctors are not taught. Anyway, now the HMO that I work for has 12 million patients, Anthony. 12 million. 6,000 providers. If I took the same numbers that I just quoted to you and I extrapolated it to the 12 million members, it means in total between those who are TOFI and those who are or obese with big bellies and so on, 8 million. 8 million of them are at risk for metabolic syndrome. But they won't know it. Why won't they know it? Because their providers, even assuming they know what metabolic syndrome is, and many of them don't know how to measure it. They don't know what tests to take that are proper for them to expose that they have this condition. They don't know how to explain the associated downstream of risks to the patient for their health, the chronic diseases, some of them I mentioned above. Now, the excess dietary sugar that occurs as a result of these foods being broken down, these carb foods being broken down by the body and digested, sugar coats all the cell membranes and their proteins. This process is called glycation. And then uh, having these cellular proteins being covered with sugar, uh, it changes their properties, of course, but then they're more easily oxidated. Uh, I think of oxidation with free radicals and so on as being rusting. I think of it as being rusting. So if you did the bone marrow of a baby, it would be white. If you did the bone marrow of someone who's 85 years old, it would be brown. What is that? That's a Maillard reaction. It's rusting of the proteins. It
Yeah.
denatures the proteins and it makes us sick and inflamed. Now,
I see that in surgery, like when we're doing cranial-based surgery or even spinal surgery on older
yes,
patients, sick patients, there's actually a browning. Like you said, I mean, when we're doing pediatric cases, the bone is funny enough, bone white. And
yes,
then as people get over this sort of this sort of gets a custard, creamy color, then a custard color, and you can actually get brown. I've had older patients that were, smokers, drinkers, things like that.
yes,
It's just it was an actual brown hue to the bone.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even the normal process of digestion, you're going to get some of this browning.
Yeah.
Uh, the rusting of bread is called toast. That's what it is. It's the sugar in the bread combining with uh,
Mhm.
the protein in the bread that turns the color. We love it. We love the taste of it. The amylase in our mouth breaks down this
Mhm.
amylopectin A that we get from the bread, and we think we're uh, we're in seventh heaven when we eat a bagel, but it's killing us.
Mhm.
Not the one bagel, but the cumulative bagels over a number of years. Anyway, so these advanced glycation end products, these toxic gunk that is accelerated by having a high carb diet, it binds to our proteins. So if it binds to the lens proteins, the crystalline proteins in the lens, what do you get? Cataracts. If it binds to the um, collagen protein in the back of the eye under the basement membrane, where the rods and cones of the eye are, what do you get? Macular degeneration and blindness. And you have leading thinkers who are telling you that instead of having macular degeneration, needing injections into the eyeball, what you need to do is get started on a low carb carnivore diet, and you'll stop this proliferation of the advanced glycation end products, and maybe you'll be able to arrest your dry or wet macular degeneration. Accumulation of these advanced glycation end products, this uh, oxygenated uh, junk, uh, accelerate the presence of that in joint collagen accelerates collagen destruction, leading to osteoarthritis, pain, and the need for aggressive joint replacements. And Dr. Baker and Dr. Fetke, two prominent orthopedic surgeons and uh, low carb advocates, have said that, it's not so much that uh, you can put a patient on a low carb diet and it won't automatically, miraculously put back collagen that they've lost over many years because of the junk food that they're eating. But what it does do, many of these patients lose their morbid obesity. And when they do that, there's less pressure or pain in their joints. And so uh, a lot of them, maybe half of the patient population, have canceled their orthopedic surgery because even though they haven't restored their collagen in their cartilage, at least their pain is less because they've lost all that weight. So nothing could make them happier than not having to operate on these patients doing joint replacements. Anyway, when the brain cells of the brain become sugar coated because of insulin resistance, and the whatever insulin they had can't get into the across a blood-brain barrier to modulate the use of glucose in their brains. Brains are flooded with sugar, and the sugar is not benign. It sticks to the brain cells, proteins, degenerates their membranes, impairs neurotransmission, and so on. So what happens with these brains over time? Take a fat person with diabetes or another person who does not have this condition and do your brain scans, and you'll show that there's a tremendous early loss of gray and white matter in the brains of patients who have metabolic syndrome. And so this loss of brain volume, of course, is associated with dementia, which we now call type 3 diabetes, but it's all due to the ill effects of having too much sugar in the presence of insulin resistance. So um, anyway, you know this better than I do, but it's just the idea that all those years in which I had the fats in my blood were running high, my doctor didn't say anything he didn't know. I didn't say anything I didn't know. We have two uh, um, two dumbbells looking at one another, not realizing that my coronary arteries were getting full of calcium, and it probably potentially toxic effects to my brain. And if I went to Dr. Mark Hyman or to yourself or to Dr. Ben Bickman, and they sat me down, they would say, Don, your triglycerides are too over 200. This is in 2008, no less. They would say, well, we have to do something because if you continue on this path, you're going to get heart disease, you're going to get hypertension, you're going to get prediabetes, all the things I had, incidentally, because no one knew enough to point out to me that what I was doing was wrong, and I didn't know about it either. So that's why I say to your audience, don't believe that your physician knows what he should know. He does not know it. He does not know it. That's why we're suffering the epidemics of chronic ill health that we are. Um, let's go to the next slide if we can.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, this is courtesy of Dr. Gary Fetke. This is what you're seeing in these black hairy structures is the inner lining of the blood vessels. There are two things we're observing. The hairy cells, which is called hairy structures, which is the glycocalyx, which most physicians don't know anything about, and then the underlying endothelial lining. And you can see that after a high carb meal, it absolutely wipes out your glycocalyx, which is protective of the lining of your artery. Just
Yeah.
wipes it out.
Okay.
Now, It will recover. It will recover, but it takes 8 to 12 hours to recover. Now, I want you to picture this for a moment, Anthony. Uh, I'm in earnest, and I go to the my HMO dietitian. I say, "Look, I need to lose. I need to do something. What can I do?" They say, "Well, don't sit down and have three big meals a day. What you need to do is have small, frequent meals of your eating. But what are their meals? Their meals are mostly carbohydrate. That's what they tell me to eat, essentially. Carbohydrate dominant. Now, I've just eaten breakfast and I've wiped out my glycocalyx. Now they want me to, while the lining is trying to recover, they're asking me to eat again every few hours, smaller amounts of what? Of carbohydrate. So the lining of of the blood vessels never has a chance to recover fully because it's always being slaughtered by an onset of high sugar. And of course, these dietitians are all trained in the corrupt uh, current food guidelines or their variants. They're still carbohydrate dominant to a large extent, and so I'll never recover. Now, this glycocalyx is not sitting there doing nothing. It has contains nitric oxide, and if you wipe out the nitric oxide, then you cannot. You know that the nitric oxide is especially prevalent in the capillaries of the skin. When sunlight hits it, the precursors are activated. You get nitric oxide, and it dilates the blood vessels. So if you're wiping out the nitric oxide, you're losing one mechanism by which you can lower your blood pressure by dilating your blood vessels. Okay. So why would you want to do that? Well, you wouldn't, but the people who are teaching you nutrition don't know anything about it. And if you do have a high carb breakfast, you're going to be hungry in a few hours. You can bet your life because you're going to get a big sugar spike, then you're going to get a big insulin spike, and it will send you sugar crashing, and then you're going to be hungry again. So you're going to want to eat in 2 hours and 4 hours and 6 hours. And the lining of your blood vessels will never heal. Um, the high sugar that you're getting in your food after a carb meal acts like sandpaper, just strips off these protective layers. The red cells in your blood become coated with sugar. That's why we do the hemoglobin A1C. And the red cell membranes are supposed to be very um, bendable as they slip through the blood vessels. But when they're glycated, heavily glycated and oxygenated, they become stiff as bullets. And in areas of turbulence where you have like bifurcations in the carotid arteries or in the heart, they also damage the delicate lining of the blood vessels. Why? Because they're sugar coated and they're stiff instead of being pliable. So you got the sugar in your blood acting as sandpaper. You've got sticky um, red cells that are not pliable, hitting your endothelial lining like bullets. And then you wonder why the lining of the underlying endothelium is damaged. That's why it's damaged. The only way to prevent that is to go on a high protein, low carb diet, and you'll minimize the damage to the lining of your blood vessel. Now, the lining of my coronary vessels was damaged over a number of years because I didn't know any better, and my doctor was as ignorant as I was. So that's why I have the lining of the blood vessels tries to heal itself by depositing calcium. So I have stovepipe coronary arteries, which are heavily calcified. But the only difference now is that being on a uh, low carb diet, I'm increasing my HDL, and hopefully the HDL will help to strip uh, uh, some of the deposits away and reverse, send some of the cholesterol plaque or its precursors back to and dump cholesterol back into the liver where it belongs instead of into my coronary arteries. That's the hope anyway. And William Davis, in his series of patients who had serial coronary artery calcium scores, uh, has shown that it is possible to reverse even um, calcified coronary plaque by going on a low carb diet or ketogenic diet or carnivore diet. It is possible to reverse it. So I'm hopeful from that point of view. Okay. Anyway, as you may know, Malcolm Kendricks has proposed that what happens when you strip off the lining and you damage the underlying endothelium is that the red cells form a clot there, and that the endothelial um, precursor cells from the bone marrow will try to cover it up as best you can. But if you keep slow cells, sugar cells, it can't repair mechanisms can't keep up. That's when you get bigger and bigger clots. Some of these break off and will cause stroke or heart attack. Um, anyway,
You're sort of
um,
breaking up there. Um, might have been an issue with the internet.
okay, are we okay?
I think it should be okay. Yeah, it seems to have
Okay.
cleared up.
Anyway, for the listening audience, your viewers are sophisticated enough to know what the parameters of metabolic syndrome are. They are obesity or overweight, high fat, high blood fats, triglycerides, low HDL, elevated fasting sugar, and hypertension. Uh, 93% of patients have at least 93% of the American population has at least one of these parameters. You need three to make a formal diagnosis, but we're splitting hairs here. So anyway, what you're looking at is all the downstream consequences of having undiagnosed and improperly treated metabolic syndrome. We mentioned heart disease, lipid issues with high triglycerides and low cholesterol and low HDL lipoproteins, high blood pressure, the effects of insulin. In uh, I won't go into it, but there are many different ways in which high insulin causes hypertension, type 2 diabetes. We know dementia, um, which we now call type 3 diabetes because the sugar is the brain is flooded with sugar that denatures the proteins. Cancer is an inflammatory disease. A big um, studies done by Thomas Seyfried at Boston College have shown that cancer is basically an inflammatory disease affecting uh, inflammation in the mitochondria first and only secondarily in the DNA. And he has a protocol where he can treat cancer patients without chemotherapy or even radiation therapy. But of course, his brilliant research has been stifled by big pharma and big medicine, even though he has the science to back it up. Anyway, polycystic ovarian syndrome occurs because high insulin levels interfere with the transducing of testosterone into estrogen, and therefore you have more testosterone, less estrogen, you become infertile. That's polycystic ovarian syndrome. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, an epidemic even in children now, because of they eat diets that are high in fructose, like soft drinks high in fructose, high fructose corn syrup. Their livers can't cope. After about a half a pound of fat in the liver, it becomes toxic to the liver. And you see young kids now developing insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, many of them requiring uh, go into liver failure, require transplantations. It's horrendous. But all of these are due to the fact that a physician did not sit down with their patient and explain that they need to be on a low carb diet, and their fatty liver can reverse in a period of 2 weeks or so. Their functions can return to normal. We never tell these patients. This is a crime against humanity as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's go on to um, let me just say that the proper workup for metabolic syndrome, the workup that is not done, is that these patients are all at risk and they deserve a full baseline proper metabolic screening. A good screening would include a fasting sugar and a fasting insulin. A better screening would be to add a 2-hour glucose tolerance test to it. And the best would be a 5-hour craft test where we measure both spikes in glucose and insulin. Any blood sugar over 200 counts as diabetes, and it doesn't matter what your A1C is. You can have an A1C of 5.7 And we define diabetes as having an A1C of 6.5 or greater. But if you have an A1C of 5.7 and I give you a load of glucose and your sugar spikes an hour or two after eating to over 200, that's diabetes. Doesn't matter. But your doctor will never order this test for you because he doesn't know or he's been given orders from above that he shouldn't do the test because it's too expensive or something, some ridiculous thing. It is criminal. Let's go to slide number 4. Next one. So this is the lipoprotein, and it's been stigmatized as being a bad actor, um, but it may be actually more of the firefighter than the arsonist when it comes to the lining of your coronary arteries or your carotid arteries. If you are in a traffic accident and you break your bones, fat from your bone marrow leaks out and it goes to your brain or your heart or your kidneys, and it causes a fat embolus, and it kills you basically. And so the body has does not allow fat to circulate in the blood freely. You can circulate the protein freely, you can circulate the sugar freely, but not fat. So fat is contained within these tiny particles called lipoproteins, and the inside of the particle has triglycerides. Triglycerides are basically your fat, and they can either be burned or stored. If you're on a high carb diet, you're going to get an excess of the triglycerides, most of which will be stored as fat. If you're on a low carb diet with low insulin levels, the triglycerides will either turn into the fatty acids or turn into ketones, and they'll be burned very, very efficiently, and you won't get the buildup of fat, and in fact, your fat cells will deliver uh, triglycerides to your liver for processing and turn into ketones. So uh, as long as you don't have excess triglycerides and your insulin levels are low, you're okay. It's when your consumption of dietary carbs leads to high insulin levels, that's when you're into trouble. Cholesterol, esters, very, very important. Cholesterol isn't really metabolized as far as energy is concerned, but it is used as building blocks for uh, cell membranes. It's so important. Most of cells of the body have make their own cholesterol, but some areas need a little bit more, and the lipoprotein supplies it. Now, the cholesterol is so important that the brain makes its own, as you know and I've said, and the brain requires lots of cholesterol because so much of its membrane surface is made of cholesterol. When you give a patient a statin or a PCSK9 inhibitors, what do? You lower the cholesterol level, not only in the body, but the medication goes to the brain and interferes with cholesterol production in the brain, and therefore interferes with um, the proper amounts of uh, production of brain cell membranes. And that's why you have studies in which patients have given statins, their Alzheimer's disease gets worse, or they may have normal cognitive function, but you give them the statin and they become confused because the cholesterol synthesis is shut down in the brain, and the brain needs the cholesterol to make proper membrane structures for its neurons. So that's an issue. Now, on the outside is that green band. That's the apolipoprotein, or the one that we're interested in is the ApoB primarily, and it has major functions in the body that protects us from cancer and it protects us from infection. And if you damage this apolipoprotein A100, then you lose those functions. Um, so, and now what we don't see deep inside this lipoprotein are the antioxidants in them. Vitamins A, vitamins D, vitamins E, vitamin K. These are all fat soluble. You need fat in your diet to get the proper amounts of these uh, antioxidant vitamins into your system. And there's also coenzyme Q uh, involved in as an antioxidant and helps the muscles use their ATP. And the statins and PCSK9 inhibitors uh, make a mess of this of the function. Anyway, the let's go to the next slide, if you would.
Yep.
Okay, here's what I'm talking about. So you have bacterial endotoxins. For example, we talked about the fact that we've lost our natural immunity uh, uh, in our gut because we've wiped out the beneficial flora by loading it with glyphosates or loading it with antibiotics. We've wiped those out like L. reuteri, and as a result, the colon bacteria, which are let's say these little brown spots on the left, climb up and get into our gut. They help to degrade the mucus lining, which is protective of our small intestine, and they cause tears or rents um, in the lining of the gut. When they die, and within a few hours, they release all these toxins uh, into the um, into the circulation uh, because they've already punched holes in the gut, and now the toxins are leaking through. What's the first line of defense? It's these lipoproteins. That green band that I showed, uh, the that's the protein part of the LDL particle. It helps to uh, it helps to neutralize an enzyme that these bacteria need to tell them to grow. And if you wipe out the number or function of these lipoprotein particles, then you impair cancer immunity and you impair um, in infection protection. And that is why this so many of studies done where patients have been placed on chronic statin use. Uh, they lower their cholesterol, but they die of cancer and they die of infection at a much higher rate than those who never took the medications because you're wiping out the function of these lipoproteins. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. And again, it is the vitamins that tend to come to the rescue. Um, the AD and K are antioxidants, and they help to reduce the toxicity that is caused uh, uh, by the toxins released by these bacteria. Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so basically we have good we have large lipoproteins and small lipoproteins. The large lipoproteins are associated with people who eat a healthy diet that is low in carbohydrate, high in protein and fat. These larger uh, lipoprotein molecules are over 70 nanometers. Why is that important? Because if they're over 70, they bounce off the walls of your arteries. They cannot get embedded inside the walls of the arteries. They are not the cause of atherosclerotic plaque. The small ones, the small dense LDLs, for example, uh, are less than 70 nanometers, and so are the VLDL remnants. They penetrate through the wall of the endothelium that I showed you, and they get into the walls and they coalesce together in foam cells to form these plaques, which we call hardening of the arteries. Let's try the next one. So here's what I'm talking about. The VLDL remnants and the small dense LDL particles are the ones that are atherogenic because they're very small. If you eat a diet that's high in carbohydrate and low in fat, this is what you get. You got a lot of these VLDL remnants. You get a lot of these small dense LDL particles. These are the ones that cause the problems. They're the ones who bury themselves inside the wall of the artery and cause plaque. When you're eating a healthy diet, which is low carb, carnivore, you get particles that are bigger. They bounce off the walls. They don't get into the inside of the artery. They don't cause plaque. Let's try the next slide.
And probably if you have an intact glycocalyx, probably and you have
Yes,
laminar flow and everything like that, it's not going to hit the wall in the
right.
first place.
That's exactly right. All these bad actors go together. High
Yeah.
sugar, high insulin, fructose. In the pathway of fructose, you get uric acid, which when the level reaches over 5.5 can also directly be toxic to the lining of the walls of the arteries. If you're a B12 deficient because you're not getting enough meat, uh, the B12 deficient can raise their homocysteine levels. When the levels of homocysteine get too high, it is also directly toxic to the glycocalyx and the endothelial artery and endothelial lining. So all these actors working together, including red cells that are sticky and stiff as bullets, and high sugar in excess, which acts like sandpaper to strip off the glycocalyx, they all act together to give you the whole gestalt is going to give you bad arteries. And I had that for many years. No one said anything I didn't know. Now, here is uh, from a standard panel. Your doctor does a lipid panel and he can find out what your triglycerides are. But he can't tell you um, what percentage of your LDLs are the small dense LDL. He can't tell you that. But this graph can, and you can mark down on the if you get a screenshot or if you apply to Dr. Chaffee, maybe he can provide this to you. But in any event, you can mark where your triglycerides are, and then the work has already been done for you. You can measure how much, what percentage of your lipoproteins are actually these dangerous small dense ones. So you go up to about 20% or so. Ideal would be less than 10%. And when I had a triglycerides of 200, you could see where that is on the chart. I was definitely in pattern B. I had very, very high small dense LDL, which was damaging my coronary arteries and leading to calcified plaque. And then now my triglycerides are about 57 or 59, and you can see that I have less than 10% of small dense LDL. So I'm relatively more protected now than I was. And go on to the next slide. And here it is. Here's another graph, which shows that if your triglycerides are over 95, you're more likely to have the what they call phenotype B, which is a lot of small dense LDL, a lot of remnant VLDL. Whereas if your triglycerides are less than 95, you're more likely to have a healthy phenotype A with very, very small amounts of small LDL, very, very small amounts of um, VLDL remnants. Phenotype A is what you find in patients who are eating a carnivore or low carb diet. Phenotype B is the sort of chart that you get when patients are consuming a high carb diet and low fat. It can't be any clearer than that. Let's go on to the next slide. So here you can see. Let's take a look at the bottom graph first. Uh, the saturated fat increases your LDL, but it's a good type of LDL. It's a low type that can penetrate into your coronary arteries. This is someone who is on a carb or a low carb or carnivore diet. And VLDL is on the left side, HDL is on the right side, the far left, far right. And you can see I only have on the far left a little bit of a spike in my VLDL. I don't have very many um, bad LDL remnants that are too small, and I'm going to get into my coronary arteries. On the far right side, you see this large green pattern. I have a good amount of HDL, which is cardioprotective. Um, it is inversely correlated with heart disease. So I have got I've got a single peak of good LDL, which is large and buoyant. I've got a small amount of VLDL remnants on the far left side and a large amount of healthy HDL. This is someone who is eating a low carb, high fat diet, carnivore based primarily. On the upper side, you see someone who is on a high carb, low fat diet, the traditional standard American diet. And you can see multiple peaks in the area of the LDL. These are all small dense LDL particles. And this person has what they call phenotype B, and the healthy one on the bottom is phenotype A. That's the graph that I just showed you. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so here's your glucose tolerance test that you have to beg your doctor for because he won't offer it to you, usually. You have a patient whose hemoglobin A1C is not at the diabetic range. It's not 6.5 or over, maybe less than that. But it may be 5.7, 5.8, the way I have it. You order a glucose tolerance test. A normal test is the green line on the bottom. An abnormal test is everything else above it. And uh, if I if I give you a load of 75 grams of glucose and your sugar spikes over 200, that is diabetes. I don't care what your A1C is. And you should be more aggressive in terms of monitoring, not less aggressive. But you won't know because your doctor doesn't routinely order them. Next slide. This is a measure of your insulin excursion. It shows the amount of insulin reserve you have. The green line is normal. You eat something, you get a little spike of your insulin. It comes down quickly, goes down to baseline. Everything above that is abnormal. It's diabetes. It doesn't matter what your A1C is. Just because your A1C is 6.4 and not 6.5 doesn't make you not diabetic. You're diabetic. You've got these curves. This is a standard craft test, 4 or 5 hours. Your doctor doesn't know what it is, probably, and doesn't order it routinely. This has to change. We have in my HMO, we have 8 million patients at risk for uh, insulin resistance and diabetes. None of these tests are done. We could do them. They're not that expensive, but we don't do them. And that is absolutely criminal as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, go on to the next slide if there is a next slide.
Yep.
This fellow is on the internet and he uses a home glucose monitor. He's not diabetic as far as I know, but he was curious and he got a continuous home glucose monitor, which you slap on your in the back of your arm. It has a microneedle and it measures the sugar in your skin, which is a reflection of the sugar in your blood, and you're able to track your sugar spikes. So, supposing I'm eating a bowl of oatmeal, which the American Heart Association says is heart healthy, right? Everybody knows that they put their seal of approval on all these sugary cereals because they've been corrupted and bought out by these big companies. And you have you're curious and you say, well, I have diabetes and my doctor and the American Heart Association say that it's good to eat oatmeal, it's heart healthy. So you have your bowl of oatmeal and you're measuring your sugars in your blood and you get this huge spike that you can see on your continuous glucose monitor. So you can actually see the effects. Now, what happens if you have 8 million people and they're all eating oatmeal, Anthony,
Mm.
and you give these people monitor their blood sugar 3 hours after eating their bowl? American Heart, this is hard out, and you get this spike, and you have an informed doctor who says this is really dangerous for you. I don't care what the American Heart Association says. I don't care what your HMO dietitian says. Oatmeal is not heart healthy for you. You okay? Are we okay?
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm good.
uh, so you'd have 8 million people who say, "Whoa, I never realized that a bowl of oatmeal can cause this amount of high sugar. I'm not going to eat oatmeal anymore." What would happen to the cereal makers who make the oatmeal? You think they're going to want to have informed citizenry who are given these home glucose monitors? Of course not. They will lose their profits the more people become informed as to what these crap foods are doing to their bodies. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Here's a standard food pyramid. So what's the history behind here? Um, this is from the Harvard School of Public Health, the Chan Harvard School of Public Health. They've been tied in with the Seventh-day Adventists since about 1950. Uh, in 1820, you had Sylvester Graham, who developed the graham cracker. He was part of the temperance movement that decried the use of alcohol and promoted the use of whole grain cereal grains as being healthy for you. In 1860, you had uh, Miss White and Ellen White, who is the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, who thought that, as you have said, that eating meat promoted bad thoughts, led to masturbation and immorality. And so she had visions in which she said that no, you have to eschew meat and you have to eat only whole grains and so on. Uh, and her acolyte was Lena Cooper, who helped to establish the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And she's in the 45th printing of her definitive book of nutrition, which most um dietitians have. And they preach the avoidance of meat in favor of whole grains and so on. No scientific basis. It's all based on the fact that they thought it was immoral. And the biggest pushers of where we are in the food pyramid, the pushing whole grains and so on instead of meat, came from the Kellogg family. We know Harvey Kellogg and his brother, physicians, established a sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, and they invite all sorts of dignitaries and so on. He was a Seventh-day Adventist. He followed Ellen White's teachings, and he promoted instead of meat, corn cereal and soya products, and these have been the bane of humanity because the amount of carbs in them is packing on our weight, causing insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and all the downstream illnesses. As of 2025, we're still using these pyramids. The only thing that's different from the previous pyramid is that they've now added seed oils, which are full of oxidation products and toxins, which also contribute to inflammation, leaky gut, and so on and so forth. Uh, in any event, the leaders who produced this pyramid are the same people who gave us the Eat Lancet study, which is against meat. These people have been paid off by big drug, big food. They're in the pockets of them. The so this is a corrupt guideline that's making us sicker, making us fatter. There is a whole interconnected web of big food and big pharma. And the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics was helped to be established by the Adventist Church. They license all the dietitians in the country, including the dietitians that are in my HMO, um, and they preach basically anti-meat propaganda. The food pyramid should be reversed. We should have a large amount of meat at the bottom and a tiny amount of carbs, if any, at the top. But that's not what you're seeing here. And this is promoted by the government in cahoots with big food and big pharma. Uh, these cereal manufacturers make and sell millions of boxes of sugary cereal approved by the American Heart Association, American Diabetic Association, and so on. They're all in cahoots. They're all getting big payouts from these companies. The executives of these boards of these big multinational uh, companies that make all these cereals, all this crap food, uh, uh, are doing high fives all the time because they know that all you need to do is find this key group of uh, influencers like Harvard, like Tufts, and so on. And what you do is you corrupt the people at the very top who are putting out these guidelines. And then you've got the medical profession by the brass nuts. You've got them because they are captive. They don't know how to think for themselves. They follow orders. Medicine is an authoritarian system from the top down, and You tend to listen to the person above you, and if you may be producing crap science based on epidemiological or observational studies, but because you're from Tufts or Harvard, it is accepted. But it's very, very poor science. It's really crap science. It's not based on randomized controlled clinical trials. And yet people believe that it's because it's Harvard or Tufts that they are producing the best scientific evidence in support of that. It's all nonsense. It was created in corruption and perpetuated in corruption. And these major guidelines were produced and released in 1980. The people did not the people who adjudicated what foods should be on these pyramids and in what amounts. Most of them were vegetarians or committed vegans. A lot of them were animal rights activists, yet they never declared a conflict of interest. This is still going on today, and a lot of them receive tremendous amounts of money and are corrupted by these major corporations, big food, big pharma. Uh, we need to educate the public, and we need to develop class action lawsuits to reverse these indignities that are being hoisted on the American people. Next slide, please.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
Here again is from Tufts University. This is the compass, and Nina Teicholz did an evaluation of it. And most of the foods on the top are crap foods, and yet they're given as a score of 100% as being heart healthy. You've got frosted mini wheats, you've got chocolate covered almonds there, orange juice, honey nut Cheerios, ranking right at the top. What's ranked at the bottom? Ground beef, cheddar cheese, and whole eggs and butter. The healthiest foods are treated as pariahs, and the crap foods are given 100%. Now, the the person or persons who put this tough study out are paid off, are bought off by big food. That's why you're seeing the corrupted results that are killing millions of people who believe and trust that these are based on science, and they're not. They're based on corporate corruption. Next slide, please.
I was just gonna say too, I mean, just even saying just almond M&Ms, like actual candy, is better than ground beef and eggs and things
Oh
like
my
that.
God. Are you
Or
kidding me? Are you
yeah,
kidding me?
and then up at the top, chocolate covered almonds. That's to be encouraged. And I've heard people try to make such lame excuses for this
Oh my
by
God.
saying that it's like, well, no, but that's showing ground beef and then the red because it's ranked in accordance to its own different categories like meats and things like that. It says red to be minimized, right? Ground
Oh,
beef to be minimized. So of course you can compare them because you're comparing colors. You don't just have to compare within its own group. To be minimized, meat, eggs, cheese. To be encouraged, frickin' candy
oh my
and
God.
frosted mini wheats, I guess, and that's higher than normal mini wheats, I guess. So like the frosting makes
Oh yeah,
that
they have
better.
that.
And honey nut Cheerios, it outranks normal Cheerios. So that's the honey somehow makes it better. It's an absolute absurdity. They actually sent this to me at my hospital, sent this to me, and I wrote a much longer email than anybody on the other end wanted to get back. And I just went point by point and said, listen, whoever's making these guidelines, whoever's like making a decision on these guidelines, I'd love to have a conversation with them because this is going to hurt patients.
You can't, Anthony. You know why you can't? Because you've got to follow the
They
money.
don't listen.
That's the whole thrust of everything that I've presented to you in the last hour and a half or so. You got to follow
Mhm.
the money. And the only
Yeah.
way you can do that is by having really aggressive lawyers
Yeah.
who will be given the science and will say, you have to take this case to them. There, you have to do discovery. You have to find out where my HMO has thousands of vending machines in patient cafeterias, in staff cafeterias, selling processed food. They have a big sign that says you have to choose wisely. And then you go around the corner and you see these vending machines full of cookies and cakes and pastries and pretzels and so on, and junk food, candies. Are you telling me that the people who procure this from these large food corporations aren't getting kickbacks? Are you kidding me? Are you telling me that the the food being served to inflamed patients, patients who are going for the coronary bypass or are having leg amputations and are being given crap food and they're captive in the hospital? And you're telling me that there's no payola going on? You must think I was born yesterday. Uh, I have taken photographs of the cafeteria food in my HMO in various places, and it's all crap. Believe me, it's all crap. And I've looked at their menus, and it's all crap. It's all full of seed oils and lectins and toxins and sugars. And no matter what they say, they are lying through their teeth. There is money being exchanged somewhere, and a good lawyer doing proper discovery will find out will get to the bottom of it and find out who is getting payoffs from having this crop food and force feeding it to to the desperate patients in the hospital, and to the staff cafeteria, making them fatter and sicker. You know, uh, I saw a cardiologist and he recommended that I have a not a heart scan, but a thallium treadmill test. Okay, which will only show obstructed flow, and I'm in better shape than he is probably. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the small plaque that's friable and will break off into my coronary arteries or my carotids. But since I started the carnivore diet and I have a high HDL and low LDL, I'm not worried so much about that anymore. But my point is that his nurse who came in to examine me had a big wad of fat around her belly, and he sent me down to his secretary to get me registered for a date to have this thallium treadmill test. And she was at least 400 pounds, and she had a big bag of fudgeable cookies next to her that was open. And I'm saying to myself, my God, my HMO cannot even take care of its own, let alone advise patients on proper nutrition. And Anthony, if you, like me, have been to a medical convention, you know that they have rows of tables. And on every table, at every stop for where physicians sit, they have big bowls of candy. And then you're thirsty, so you go to the back of the room. What's at the back of the room? Juices of various sorts. There's water, of course. And there are diet drinks and regular soft drinks. What are you going to order for lunch? Well, you have your choice. You can have salads drenched uh, in seed oil salad dressings. Um, you can have as much bread as you like because the plates are overflowing. You can have as rich desserts as you like. And then when the doctors stand up to do a little exercise break during the formal sessions, you have never seen such a sea of obese and stressed out and overweight physicians. I really feel sorry for them. They are as ignorant, and it's affecting not only their patients but their own health. They just do not know. We have to force change if change will not come internally. Modern medicine, ladies and gentlemen, is a house of cards built on a bed of sand, and it's starting to collapse now. You just blow on it, it's going to collapse. We need someone who is very aggressive, who will start looking at the science and getting the experts lined up and taking the case against these HMOs to start with uh, to reverse course. Otherwise, we're going to go bankrupt as a nation, and more people are going to become obese and die of prematurely of all these chronic diseases which we discussed. You want to go to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah, and I think also pursuing things criminally as well. I mean,
Yep.
people are knowingly
Oh,
causing harm. You're hurting people and people are
yep.
dying
Oh,
prematurely. That's a criminal in my
it's a
mind.
criminal.
Yeah.
It is criminal. It is criminal. That's the next. It's going to be very, very hard to have batteries of lawyers.
Hmm.
But we have right on our side, we have justice on our side, and we have good science on our side, not junk
Hmm.
science, not the
Yeah.
observational science, randomized controlled. Here's another one. This is my plate. And this is a patient going for surgery now. This is a inflamed patient going for surgery. And you can see that the skin has been stripped off the chicken. That's the healthiest part, full of animal fat. That's the part that you need to repair your tissues. That's been taken off. You have strawberries drenched in glyphosate or whatever poisons that are seeping into them. And you have your bread, of course. And the bread has sugars inside, amylopectin A, which when it breaks down, spikes your sugar higher than a sugar cube. And it has the lectins in it, which uh, destroy the tight junctions of your gut and travel to your brain and go to your substantia nigra and interfere with dopamine production, leading to Parkinson's disease. All this crap, and but you cannot get a decent piece of fish. You can't get a steak. Uh, all you get is crap food, and these people are captive. They like in the military, like in schools, like in old age homes. The people are captive because the federal government will, bought off by big food and big pharma, will not change the guidelines. Maybe they'll change this year. It's supposed to in 2025, but don't hold your breath. Next slide, please. Okay, so here you see, here's the introduction of the food guidelines that we talked about. Uh, Nick Mottern was a intern working with the Commission in 1977, 1980, and McGovern was very impatient. Yeah, he had just gotten off a Pritikin program. He's very impatient to make sure that people didn't die of heart attacks the way Eisenhower did, and so he rushed to judgment. He put up these dietary guidelines. That's a food pyramid we just saw, minus the seed oils. And so look at the incidence of this is obesity and overweight, but it could be any disease, you name it. Starting in 1980, you can see that before that there was a little bit of a rise in the incidence, but then 1980 was a big year when they published these guidelines, and then the incidence of all these chronic metabolic diseases that we discussed previously shot up. Okay, next slide. Because it's toxic, it's poison.
It
We're
is.
poisoning our population.
Absolutely.
Okay, we don't need to go into this, but you can see basically that the all the benefits of low carb ketogenic or carnivore diet on the left side, and the fact that the LDL cholesterol goes up is absolutely relevant. It has nothing to do at all with coronary disease. And uh, this was a study by Bickman and Paul Mason and David Diamond. Uh, Anyone who hasn't seen their symposia on YouTube it's absolutely revelatory. Uh, and this is one of the reasons why I went off my own statins. It was absolutely wrecking me. It was lowering my HDL and probably causing osteoporosis and all sorts of other crap. Okay, next slide. Again, uh, how you cure all these chronic metabolic illnesses caused by insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, by just lowering your carbs, you lower your insulin levels, and you lower you turn down the inflammatory effects of insulin, and you turn down the obesogenic effects of insulin, and all these chronic conditions have been reported to go away when you do that. Next slide, please. Okay, Sean O'Mara, you may have seen him on YouTube. Uh, Everything in white is fat. And you would think that a radiologist would say, this person has abdominal fat, he has visceral fat, he has deep subcutaneous fat. The liver can hold about a half a pound before it becomes toxic. The guts can hold about 2 pounds before toxicity affects it, and the deep subcutaneous skin can hold about 22 pounds. Beyond that, everything is toxic. You can see this, all this sea of white is all fat where it doesn't belong. It's all ectopic fat. It's even infiltrated the muscles, which is why fat people have difficulty standing, getting up, because the more fat you have in your muscles, the weaker they become. You become sarcopenic, your muscles become weak and degenerated because of all the fat infiltration. So Sean O'Mara says, why don't radiologists report out that this can be the first potential sign of metabolic syndrome? Whoever orders a test or the primary physician needs to start doing immediately a blood test metabolic workup for metabolic syndrome. This patient has metabolic syndrome until proven otherwise. But you know what? It is not in the radiology protocol currently to report this out. So a patient won't know, he may know that he's fat, but he doesn't know the implications of the presence of fat in his belly and around his heart and in his kidneys and in his neck and tongue. He doesn't know any of this because his doctors are ignorant. They don't know. They don't tell him. Radiology doesn't report it out. You're missing a lot of people who would otherwise they're experiencing double the rate of death because they have this appearance on their MRIs or CT scans, but it's not reported out. The radiologists have to be compelled by law or by lawsuit to start reporting out this finding. Maybe this patient had a CT or MRI for reasons having nothing to do with metabolic syndrome. Maybe they had appendicitis or gallstone disease or kidney stones. Whatever the reason, if you find this, you've got to report it out. It's malpractice not to report it out, but they don't because it's not in the protocol yet. Next slide, please.
Just so you know, Don, I've got about 10 minutes before I have another appointment
Okay,
starting.
I'll try to make it quick. Yeah, we're almost at the end. Okay, my heart scan is on the far right because of the years of neglect and it's increased risk of heart disease. But I'm trying to reverse that now by getting my HDL up, lowering my LDL by through a carnivore diet. And if Dr. Davis is right, then I'm going to be reversing my risk of getting premature death from a heart attack. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please.
Okay. Um, some more candy.
Yeah, that's it. This is what I found in the staff cafeteria.
Mhm.
It's really terrible. Yeah, it's beyond disgusting. It's criminal. Next slide, please. That's me before I went on the carnivore diet. You can see how
Nice.
fat my neck was, my face, my belly. I had this sleep apnea because my tongue was full of fat, my neck was full of fat, and I was obstructing my airways at night. Go ahead, next slide. This is me just um, probably about 8 or 9 months into a carnivore diet. My face is thin, my eyes are bright. I'm old, but I'm healthy
Yeah.
for the first
Massive.
time in my life. Right?
Yeah. That's great.
You can start at any age. You just need to have the science behind you.
Yeah,
Here,
absolutely.
yeah. This was my triglycerides, and the two of us, my doctor and I, sitting opposite one another, dumb as doorknobs, not understanding that all these years where I had high triglycerides, it was probably degenerating my brain, but also plugging my coronary vessels with plaque. It's only at the very, very last on the far right that you can see the effect of the carnivore diet in lowering my triglycerides to safe levels. Next slide, please.
It's taking a minute to load. There we go.
There it is. And you can see what happens when I start on a carnivore diet. For so many years, when my triglycerides were high, my HDL, the protective, cardioprotective lipoprotein was very, very low. You want it ideally certainly over 60, and if you can get above that, even greater. But definitely over 50. You can even see where I began the carnivore diet on the far right. You can see how my HDL values shot up. This
Mm.
is cardioprotective, and it's inversely correlated with heart disease. So the higher my HDL, the better it'll be. But this is a living example of how people can change their lives by eliminating carbohydrates from. I don't know if there are any more slides left, or that's it, or what.
I think um, keeps we're having difficulty. There we go.
Okay. So if you can get your triglycerides less than 82, ideally you want to be between 60 and 70 or less, but less than 82, your 10-year risk of coronary artery disease is going to be insignificant, 3% maybe. When my triglycerides were over 200, you can see that my risk of getting coronary artery disease, a heart attack, after after 10 years or so, shot up. So what I did was I lower basically by getting my triglycerides down. This is the fat that goes into your coronary arteries and your carotid arteries that is able to reduce my risk of heart disease. So I think that's probably about it. So I want to thank you very much for the privilege of being able to rant a little bit. I hope that it stimulates people to do their own reading. I don't know if you have the reading list that I sent you or the YouTube suggested, which you can pass on to your viewing audience if you want to.
Sure.
But I just want them to think and do their own research. Don't take what I'm saying as at face value. Do your own research. Take your time. I'm trying to catch up in the last 2.5 years to something that I missed out on in the last 40 years. So I
Mm.
feel very badly for the patients who I know I've harmed, and I'm trying to make restitution now as best I possibly can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're at least you're doing something, at least you recognize, the issue and are trying to do something about it, because there it's we talked about the people that are trying to change. Dr. Unwin, who was confronted by his patient who says, how dare you? You never told me this. That's, how can you even, I don't even know if you're a real doctor if you didn't
Yeah.
even know about this.
Yes.
And that was very confronting for him. And
Yeah.
he was, humble enough to really take that and internalize that and go, "Ooh, okay, what did I miss here? What's going on?" And then he
Yes.
saw it. A lot of people maybe push back and get in a fight with somebody, but and then there's a lot of people that just will refuse to believe that they've been doing something wrong, because of their own hubris, and of course they just know everything because they're a doctor, and so they,
Oh my God.
of course they're right, or because they just can't handle thinking that they're wrong. And then there's the other side of it where you have the people in the food and drug companies who are knowingly causing harm,
Oh, absolutely.
knowingly
Oh, absolutely.
propagandizing people, knowingly doing this so that they can profit off of our
Yeah,
suffering.
exactly. Follow the
That's
money.
true evil and sickness.
It's evil. It's evil, man. It's evil.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Perfect. Well, Don, it was an absolute pleasure. It was so great to hear that. It was a fantastic presentation. You and I have been talking about doing something to get some sort of class action lawsuit
Yes.
against these. Make these HMOs sit up and take notice,
Yeah.
because they can't continue to get away doing the wrong thing.
Oh my
And
God.
you know,
It's
and,
it's
and the
it's awful.
doctors working for them are not trying to do the wrong thing. They're
No,
trying,
they're
they're
not.
doing the
They're not.
best that they can. They're doing exactly what they're trained to do. And unfortunately, the medical education has been co-opted by the food and drug companies.
Yes,
And so we're just drug pushers. We're just the front end drug dealers for these pharmaceuticals.
that's right.
And that's it.
I've said the only difference between me and a mule carrying fentanyl from
Mhm.
Mexico into the United States is that I wear a white coat.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is that I was a pimp and a
Mm.
shill for Big
Mhm.
Pharma.
Yeah.
It's after 40 years, it's a terrible thing to have to admit. But the only thing that matched my stupidity was my arrogance until
Mm.
it affected me personally. Then I had a epiphany
Yeah.
that that something has to be done now. And
Mm.
if legislation is not going to do it, then we need lawsuits. And the
Yes.
process of discovery, I think, will uncover all these people who, at the highest levels, who've had the payola for years and years under the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good point. If this ever does go to court and goes through discovery, then it's going to be a big deal. I
Yeah.
think that they're gonna try very hard to avoid that
Oh,
at
yeah.
all costs.
Well,
Yeah.
they won't want the publicity. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no,
And
absolutely.
The only reason I have not fully disclosed personal details like my last name and so on is because at this point I'm not quite ready yet to be a target, to have a
Mm,
target back. So you understand that. Your
yeah,
audience
of
will,
course.
but we're trying to work with attorneys
Mm,
to get this and the funding, and it's going to take a few years, but I think we'll get there.
yeah, I
I
hope
want
so.
to thank you,
I think, yeah. Oh, you're very
thank you
welcome.
for
Yeah.
your time. It's wonderful just to be able to vent this stuff.
No, no, it was great to hear that, especially from your perspective, being on the inside for, such a long career, and and having that, change of heart and seeing this for what it is, because it is pretty amazing, and it's very reassuring for other doctors, especially in your position, to see this too. So I know I'm not crazy, and this is like, no, this is something really here. And it's just really important that more and more people see this, understand this, because then we're just going to start turning that tide, and then we're going to be in the majority, and other people holding on to the old ways are going to be like,
Yeah.
oh, well, oof, I'm sort of one of the last holdouts here. Like,
Right.
oh, maybe I should think about this.
You know,
So yeah.
I have a colleague on YouTube, Dr. Sunil Dand, and he says very often at times, you may know him, I'm embarrassed to say that I am a physician, but
Mm,
I'm not embarrassed. I am deeply, deeply ashamed of what I've
mm,
done. I feel very contrite, and
mm.
so I do take it personally. But if in the end we prevail, at least in getting the publicity and the sunlight exposure, then I will have made my small contribution. And thank you very much for everything.
Very welcome. Dr. Don, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you got a lot out of that. I know I did. Rewatch it. There was a lot there. You're going to get something out of it every time you see it. Please send this on to people that you think would benefit, and to also people that you think would be able to help out with a class action lawsuit, or who may have been harmed by these HMOs and could be part of that class action lawsuit.
Absolutely.
Leave comments down below to that effect. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.